A Man of Iron, The Turbulent Life and Improbable Presidency of Grover Cleveland by Troy Senik. I didn't know that much about Grover Cleveland going into this book, but he was a fascinating guy. As a child, I only knew the name Grover Cleveland because he was the only president to serve in 2 non-consecutive terms, at least until recently. But I say he's fascinating for a few reasons. One, because the time that he lived. Foreign policy is very much in play at this time in United States history because we're out of the Civil War, out of Reconstruction, and there are lots of foreign controversies that are about to erupt in the Spanish-American War in the McKinley term. But Grover Cleveland, they're still trying to figure this out. Like they have, there's Hawaii, like should we take over Hawaii? Should we take over Cuba? Like all these questions, because there's wide, varied opinions on these subjects. And Grover Cleveland was very much non-expansionary. He didn't see this as, the United States needs to expand and take over as much as possible. The book makes the interesting point that Grover Cleveland was a great president. He just didn't live in a time that called for a great president, in a sense. Like we think of Abraham Lincoln and George Washington as the greatest presidents, but that's because there was the Revolution to fight, there was the Civil War to fight, and so we naturally associate those terms of greatness with the people who had to go through the most adversity. So Grover Cleveland is a little different because the time of the country was a little different. If it's hard for us to see Grover Cleveland as an accessible figure now, it's because he lived in a really foreign time to us. It was a world where the income tax wasn't around yet, the tariffs were a big deal, the gold standard and the inclusion of silver was a big deal throughout his presidencies. And so I think if we were to go back in time and listen to these debates between the political contenders at the time, we would be pretty unrecognizable. And certainly the party lines wouldn't make any sense of what a Democrat and a Republican means by our today's terms of Democrat and Republican. And speaking of that, Grover Cleveland was the only Democrat elected between the Civil War and Woodrow Wilson. So he represented a party that didn't exist for long. It was like in the middle of drastic changes. So, for instance, he was very libertarian. He didn't believe that the government should intervene on just one group's behalf. He thought that was unconstitutional. In 1887, there was a group of Texas farmers. There was a bill that was going to help them, and he vetoed it. And this was the logic that he said. I can find no warrant for such an appropriation in the Constitution, and I do not believe that the power and duty of the general government ought to be extended to the relief of individual suffering, which is in no manner properly related to the public service or benefit. A prevalent tendency to disregard the limited mission of this power and duty should, I think, be steadfastly resisted, to the end that the lesson should be constantly enforced that, though the people support the government should not support the people. So Grover Cleveland was a man of conviction. I think that's the common line in his presidency, that he's going to do the thing that he thinks is right, regardless of where the political winds are blowing. And I think this is a consequence of him ascending so quickly to the presidency, because he went pretty quickly from mayor of Buffalo to governor of New York to president. It was a very short period of years where he just climbed the ladder. And so he didn't learn the political maneuverings. He didn't have to do this strategery that a lot of the other people in politics had to do in his day. This is one reason why he lost in 1888, because his philosophy was, if you didn't elect me to vote my conscience, vote for what I believed in, if you wanted me to just do whatever the people said, like what's the point of electing me at all? You just elect some robot. He was a bachelor when he was elected president, and he got married when he was in the White House, and I think that's the only time it happened. He married Frances, who was 27 years younger than him. And they also had a baby while they were at the White House, which I think is also the first and only time it happened. From reading the book, it sounds like part of the reason that he didn't get to any of that earlier in life was because he just worked so hard. Like they talk about him growing up in Buffalo, just working constantly, and he just became reliable for that. He was also a very tough guy. He had a possibly cancerous growth on the top of his mouth, and it was a big deal because no one wanted anyone to know that the president had this cancerous thing and he might not survive because of the economic implications that would come from that, the chaos that would come. So they had to perform surgery on him, but they had to do it in secret. So they went to a boat, of all places. They got a yacht. They got all these doctors that pretending to do some dental procedure, and they did this really risky procedure where they removed it. Which is it's a crazy story because they easily could have killed him or put him in a coma. Like I love the way they talk about it in the book because it just sounds so risky and so crazy, but it ended up working out. Side note: it turned out not to be cancerous, so he would have been okay. But still, they didn't know that at the time. And I think the fitting into Grover Cleveland after he left the presidency, he's 71 years old. He has a heart attack, and his final words are, "I tried so hard to do what is right." His wife Frances, though, was so young that she lived to 1947. Side note, she apparently didn't vote for Franklin Roosevelt in his third term because Grover Cleveland, her husband, was opposed to third terms. But she did vote for him in the next election because she said he didn't say anything about fourth terms. Another couple side notes I learned from this book: Grover Cleveland is on the $1,000 bill, even though it's technically not used anymore. And the Baby Ruth candy bar was supposedly named after his daughter who passed away at a young age, which is a really sad story. The more likely story is that the candy bar was named after Babe Ruth because he was a big hit at the time, but that carried some legal challenges. So officially, Baby Ruth is named for Baby Ruth, Grover Cleveland's daughter. Anyway, I thought the book was a great run-through of this fascinating figure, like I said in the beginning. And it delivered exactly what I think the author was shooting for. Fascinating man, fascinating time. I'm going to give this book 4 out of 5 stars.